I have seen offense hurt more spiritual walks probably than anything else. And so I'm wearing these offenses today. And you will notice as I preach that it is going to tend to slow me down and probably mess with me a little bit in terms of my effectiveness, but I promise it's all part of the plan. I don't know if you've known folks that after a while they are just a little bit embittered, a little bit hurt. You can hear it in their voice. You can hear the way they speak. They talk about how so-and-so hurt them, or they were part of an organization, maybe it was a business, maybe it was even a church, that didn't understand them, that didn't treat them the right way, that at some point something went wrong in their life, and they got what we could call wounded. Now, everybody gets wounded, don't they? We can't stop wounds, but what we can do is stop an offended heart. See, an offended heart comes from when we fail to take care of our wounds the right way. So we've been in this cage fighter series for several weeks now. We've been talking about, remember, these opponents of Jesus. Jesus loves everybody. Jesus was always reaching out to everybody. And yet the folks that gave him the hardest time was this group of folks called the Pharisees. And many of you remember they were the religious leaders in Jesus' day. But they were grossly misrepresenting the heart of the Father. And Jesus was TO'd about it. They were very hypocritical. They showed themselves to be very religious on the outside, but on the inside, their hearts were far from God. They would weigh people down with religious burdens and make people feel very, very guilty about their performance, and yet they wouldn't do much to help folks connect in a gracious way with God. And so Jesus looked at these who were supposed to be the shepherds of his people Israel, and no fooling, man, he took them to task quite a bit. We are going to study the Pharisees today, and we're going to see a wrong move that they made, where they failed to process their hurts and their wounds the right way, and it led to a downfall. Now, I want to be careful with this message, guys, because I know that everybody's coming from somewhere. I know that even talking about offenses, we may not understand what the big deal is, but believe it or not, Jesus, we're going to reveal, actually doesn't mind offending you sometimes. He doesn't. Now, we're not very used to that because we live in a culture where we're trying to avoid offending people at all costs. It's not very nice. It's not typically the socially good thing to do. In addition, really, after we're about 18 or even into college a little bit, we've had people that have critiqued or evaluated the way we do things or our choices or our grades or what have you. But for the most part, as we move on into adulthood, there's not a lot of time where people are stepping into our business, so to speak, and saying, here's what I think you should do, or here's what you're doing wrong. And so we're actually just not very used to it. So when someone says something that maybe wounds us in some way, or someone fails to come through with an expectation that we had placed upon them or something we thought they were going to do, we can be very wounded. And this wound begins to fester, and over time it becomes an offended heart. And that isn't what Jesus wants for us. Jesus wants us to be able to recover from an offended heart. Now, that doesn't mean that when we're offended that we're not valuable. Every one of us needs to know that we're significant. Every one of us needs to know that our opinion does matter. But when there are places that Jesus himself wants to step into our reality and bring a loving word of correction, we need to be able to receive it. And sometimes this is what's tough. See, if it was just Jesus, if Jesus showed up on your bed this evening and said, I got some things to talk about, it might be a little bit easier. The difficult thing is Jesus tends to do it through people, through messages, through local churches, through other means, through groups of people in our life. And it can be very hard in that moment to discern, is God trying to lead me a new way? Is God trying to correct me? Or am I just hurt and wounded because this person's a jerk? And sometimes people are jerks. And so it's very difficult to know which one to do. So I want to give you your bottom line, and then I want to talk to you about why this jacks us up, why this hurts us so much. You never know how much rides on recovering from an offense. You never know how much rides on recovering from an offense. Man, I'd sure like to be expressive right now. I'm used to kind of flailing my arms around, but it's just, there's something holding me back. I don't know what it is, but if you want to give me some extra loud amens on account of what I can't do, I'd really probably appreciate it. So offenses jack us up. They cause us to see things a little bit differently. They cause us to look at the world and maybe sometimes project things onto situations and people that aren't actually there. In addition, they cause what I would just call mental and emotional dissonance, especially for those that are Christ followers. See, when we're holding on to an offense, those who have made Jesus Christ their King and received his free gift of forgiveness, you have this sneaking feeling on the inside of you that, okay, I've been entirely forgiven, past, present, and future by Jesus Christ. I have offended his holiness with my sin way more than anyone on earth could ever offend me, and yet he has completely forgiven me. So even as a Christ follower, as we walk around holding on to offenses, there's a dissonance that we feel in our hearts often of like, how can it be that I'm forgiven? I know Jesus commanded if I'm forgiven, one of my grateful responses needs to be forgiving. And yet I'm holding on to this offense. So we've either got to just deal with that and deal with that dissonance in our heart, or we've got to create a little pocket in our heart where we say, there's a special category of things where if people hurt me in this way, Jesus is just looking the other way and he doesn't care about that kind of thing because it was so bad, which, as we all know, is just shifting reality away from reality to make us feel better about it. Here's the one that I'm most scared of. Are you ready? There's even a danger of falling away from Christ when we hold on to offenses. Now, I want to prove this to you from the scriptures. Jesus was talking about the end of the church age, which is the age we're in right now. It's the age before Jesus comes back. And he was telling us what would be the characterizing signs as we near his return. And I don't proclaim to know when that is. The Bible absolutely declares that no one will know the day or the hour, but we can definitely learn from some of the things that Jesus said would be happening. And one of the things Jesus said would be happening to characterize the nearing of the end of the church age is this, Matthew 24:10. And then many will be offended and repelled and will begin to distrust and desert him whom they ought to trust and obey, and will stumble and fall away and betray one another and pursue one another with hatred. Isn't that sad? So let's now we are very much into, you guys saw this as Armand was announcing it, we're very much into solid, good, biblical, orthodox theology. Absolutely, all that's important. We need to have good doctrine. And yet Jesus seems to be saying it's not just right beliefs that everybody needs to be concerned about. It is a right response to the offenses that will inevitably come. And when people don't have the right response, their heart begins to get icy. And they begin to harden up toward folks even that would rightly encourage them and speak to them truth and invite them into deeper relationship with God. But because they were offended at some point along the line, they're now withholding and they're now isolating. This is what happens with offenses. We withdraw, we pull back, and we say, you know what? No one's going to hurt me again. And so when we should be drawing near not just to Jesus Christ, but to his people as well, we find it increasingly difficult. And because we've failed to demonstrate grace where we've shown grace, Jesus begins to withdraw the sense of his blessing to alert us, hey, you need to come back in line with me. You need to demonstrate the forgiveness that you've been shown. Very scary stuff. I feel bad for folks when they start to tell me about their different hurts that they've had, and I feel compassion for that. But when I see that they've turned icy because of it, and you can see even their relationship with God begin to suffer, even though it wasn't God that hurt them. It is just a fulfillment of Jesus' words. Many will be offended and repelled and will begin to distrust and desert, not humans, but Jesus, him whom they ought to trust and obey. Have you seen that? Have you seen folks harden their heart toward the things of God because of something a person of God, quote unquote, did. Happens all the time, yo. So we've got to do something about recovering well. Can I tell you the parable? I hope you guys don't think I'm dishonoring to the Lord in any way when I tell you the parable of the doggy poop. Are you ready? Okay, so Joe Christian was pretty disappointed because Bill Christian came one day out of the blue. There's no explanation for it. Bill Christian hands Joe Christian a bag of stinky doggy poop. And Joe Christian didn't do anything to deserve that dog poop. And yet there he is, he's holding it, and the putrid smell is getting in his nostrils, getting in his brain, and he becomes offended. Offended that Bill would do such a thing. And so he begins to complain about it. He begins to talk about it. He goes to work, bringing his bag of stinky doggy poop with him, showing his boss, showing his coworkers, look at this doggy poop that Bill gave me. But he takes it home too. When his family is trying to watch TV at night, he pulls out the doggy poop and puts it on the coffee table and says, "You believe what Bill did? Look at this." And while his family and his coworkers feel bad for him, they also begin to think, everywhere Joe goes, it stinks. I don't know what's going on with that boy. Then one day they were trying to walk through the park and they notice they're supposed to be on a family date, but Joe is spotting doggy poop left and right. He's like, over there, dog poop. Over there, dog poop. It's right over there. Sees it everywhere. And they're like, "Oh, Joe, come on, man. I know that hurt, but can you get off the dog poop now?" It gets even worse. As time goes by, the trips to the park get even more peculiar. He's calling out dog poop where there is no dog poop. He's like, "Dog poop!" And they're like, "Dude, that's a bird's nest. What are you talking about?" But see, he's so offended by Bill's dog poop, he's seeing dog poop where it isn't. He's reinterpreting circumstances. He's projecting his hurt onto situations where his hurt doesn't exist. And people aren't acting like Bill's just a bird, man. It's just its nest. It's not Bill and his dog poop. And so increasingly, people begin to withdraw from Joe. And Joe begins to feel more and more isolated and more alone. And if you ask him today, "Hey, Joe, what's wrong?" Well, it all started with Bill's dog poop. And then life just went south. Now, was it really the fault of Bill's dog poop that life went south? Well, perhaps you could say that was the catalyst. But it was Joe's horrible response to Bill's dog poop that really hurt life. And yet, we see this all the time. Here's a secret. I'm not really talking about dog poop. Are you guys figuring that out? Okay, so here's our question for the day, my friends. In this virtue of recoverability, instead of saying, "I've got to avoid offenses at all costs," instead we want to say, offenses are inevitable. They are a part of planet Earth. I cannot get around them, but can I profit from them? Is there a way that I can use this offense to be a springboard into a greater tightness with Jesus Christ, into a greater representation of his character instead of what I would have done? You never know how much rides on recovering from an offense.